Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. They will continue our lab, that is alert lab. It's the video number 82. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have discussed an option called DNSSEC. This is an option to secure our internal DNS servers, and actually also this is used in the internet world or outside in the internet by securing also the external DNS servers. We have discussed that this option is very important to secure the queries or DNS requests from clients inside your network to internal DNS servers, and requests or clients request to DNS external servers outside in the internet. We have discussed how we can do this, how this is very important to secure your domain environment or internal servers, and this is also to secure your PC outside on the internet, so no one can redirect you to malicious servers or malicious websites. In this video we will discuss a very important concept called authentication silos. What are authentication silos? This is a very important way to protect your administrative accounts or high privilege accounts, secure them not to be hacked or not to be used. How we can do this? Let's first see a small explanation about what is Windows authentication silo. So what is authentication silo? They are containers to which administrators can assign user accounts, computers and service accounts. This is a container, but what we can do with this container, let's see here a small explanation. Provide a way to contain high privilege credentials to systems that are only pretend to selected users, computers or services. So this to contain high credential user accounts in a container. But let's see first. Silo can be defined and managed. So he is saying that we are only through authentication policy silo, we are using it to only let high privilege user accounts to access certain servers and PCs that are highly let's say that are highly important to the domain or to the network. For example, the domain controllers, the application servers. So we are restricting some very important user accounts or high privilege accounts to access certain servers and workstations in our domain. And these servers should be also highly important servers like the domain controller. So let's see here also another explanation. Are containers to which administrators can assign user accounts, computer accounts and service accounts, sets of accounts that can be managed by the authentication policies that have been applied to that container. Let's see also more about this one. With these capabilities you can limit high value account usage to high value hosts. So you are restricting high value user accounts like domain admins and administrators to use a highly value hosts like the domain controller, the application servers, something like this. So this is to restrict the access of certain users to certain computers. This is very useful when we are trying to limit certain users, for example highly privileged users like domain admins, to access only high value servers like domain controller. Why we are doing this? Because if we use the domain admin, this highly user privilege or highly user privilege account on normal workstations, it can be hacked. So for example, if you use the domain admin account on a normal workstation, if this workstation is hacked, your domain admin account could be hacked. So here we are limiting the highly value account users to be used on highly value hosts. So this authentication policy silos can help us to do this, and actually it can help us also to define a time for these users to stay attached or stay linked or stay logged to this machine, something through something called TGT, or ticket granted ticket. This is something, this is given to the account of the user. Okay, this is something like a time that he is allowed to access the resources of the network for a certain amount of time. So for example, if the TGT is 60 minutes, then my domain admin account will have only 60 minutes to access the resources of the domain. These resources could be users, groups, computers, files, for 60 minutes, and after that I will be disconnected and I need to renew this ticket so I can continue working or accessing the resources in my domain, or it could be refused completely, so I will not be able to access the resources of the domain again. So let's see what is TGT. Let's also get what is TGT. TGT Microsoft. Okay, let's see here. So this ticket, full ticket granting service, this is called full ticket granting ticket. When the client asks the KDC, this is the domain controller, for a ticket to a server, it presents credentials in a form of an authentication message and the ticket. So let's see what is TGT mean in purpose. A user authentication token issued by blah 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 to be used to request from the ticket granting access token for specific resources system joined to the domain. So here this is a request to give you, or this is a token, or this is something like a permission to let you access the domain. Or he's saying that TGT is a user authentication token issued by the key distributor center to be used to request from the ticket granting service access tokens for specific resources system joined to domain. So this is a ticket that is granted to the user so he can access the domain, and then after that, if he need to use certain resources or systems for the domain, he need to have another ticket from the ticket granting service, or he have to have another ticket granting service ticket to use specific resources in the domain. So in very short, ticket granting ticket, this is a way to access the domain. Okay, what is the TGT, or let's see what is a TGT and what is its purpose. Okay, it is are files created by the key distributor portion of the Kerberos authentication protocol that are used to grant users access to network resources. So this is very, very simple. This is used to let you access resources on the network, and the smaller is the time this granting or this ticket granting ticket period is, the more secure it is. So we will in this video use the authentication silo method to limit or to restrict access of our domain admin accounts to the domain controllers, the primary domain controller and the second domain controller, and limit the ticket granting ticket duration to 60 minutes. So this will secure our domain admin accounts, so we are given limited time to access the resources of the network. After this limited time expire, we will be disconnected from the network or the domain. And this is very useful because if, for example, a domain admin account forget and left his account logged in, this will secure it because it will be disconnected after 60 minutes. Okay, it will be disconnected from the resources or accessing the resources of the network after 60 minutes. So this is a way to secure or to let certain accounts to access certain high value hosts. Remember, in the beginning of the lab we have a scenario that we have our Active Directory distributed, or it is divided to tiers. We have said that this is a way to secure accessing of our Active Directory resources. So we have divided our Active Directory to 3 tiers. Tier 0, this is high value resources, high value servers, high value user accounts. These are at the top level of the Active Directory. and then we have tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. These are low level tiers that contains, some of them contains applications, some of them contains workstations, so they are at the down level or the down level tiers. Okay, so this is the highly level tier, and every tier have its own users and accounts. So by doing this scenario, or by doing this layout, we are controlling our Active Directory and securing it. So for example, if tier 1 is hacked, the hacker will not be able to hack tier 2 or tier 3 or tier 0. Why is this? Because after creating these tiers, every tier having its own accounts, we are denying access of each user accounts, especially the IT accounts in every tier, to access the other tiers workstations and servers. So for example, domain admin, okay, in tier 0 cannot access servers and workstation in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3, and the same applies for tier 1. IT cannot access resources in tier 2, and the same applies for tier 3, cannot access resources in tier 2. Okay, so these two separate every account from the other. So if it is hacked, the hacker will only know one account, and this account also is limited or have limited access to his resources. So IT in the Russian army or in tier 1 can only manage their users and servers and workstation in their tier. He doesn't have any permissions or things to for example, to manage servers and resources in tier 0. The same applies for tier 2 and tier 3. So this model was done using, or we have created it in a way. For example, we have created our Active Directory in this way, and then we have limited every tier to access its resources and not to access the other tiers resources by using group policies, something called deny group policies. We have denied users in this tier to access, especially the IT, to access resources in this tier. So we have used this, or we have done this using the deny group policy. Okay, we can do the same, but not without using, or but not with using group policies, but we use authentication silo. We can do this. We can use the authentication silo to limit every IT or every users in every tier to access only their resources in the tier, especially the IT. So let me show you all where was this deny group policy. For example, let's go to our local policy, gp edit. If we open the group policy, remember, if we go to Windows setting and then we have go to security and then local policies and then user rights assignment, here we can see that, for example, we have deny. We have created group policies to deny access for every users in every tier to access the other tiers resources or servers through using this group policy items. Okay, this has been done using group policies we have configured earlier in our lab. So we can use this to control or to limit access for some users in some tiers to access other tiers resources, or we can use the authentication silo. In this video I will show you all how we can limit access of certain users to certain computers, okay, using the authentication silo. Some may ask, what is the difference between, or who is better, the deny group policy or the authentication silo? Because they do the same. I have searched the internet and I have found someone talking about this or these two things. What is the difference, or what is the thing here? Someone is talking about, here is have a question saying that I have tested group policy silo feature. He's saying what are the difference between them and the deny login group policies, the one that I have showed you earlier. Who is better? So I have seen the answers. Okay, one answer was completely or it was I have been convinced. So it was saying that One of the biggest differences is that authentication policies and silos allow linking to computers and users only once. In other words, if you build a silo with admin 1, so this user will be restricted to access server 1 and server 3, you cannot build another silo for admin 2, a completely different user, to access server 2 and server 3. So server 3 can only be linked to one silo. So this is the problem. You cannot link the same server twice in two different silos. So this is maybe one defect of this this thing. Okay, hence the concept, as far as my understanding goes, it is fine for strict security areas like tier 0. So this can be done for tier 0, okay, on servers or tier 0 like the domain controller or the PAO. We have discussed this earlier, but it's not way comparable to the flexibility one has with GPOs or deny GPOs and deny login lights. And what I know from all my customer environments, this flexibility is a requirement. So this is maybe one of the things not to use authentication silo and use deny login rights. Another thing here is saying that good input, it's for more foolproof. It is more foolproof, as the only misconfiguration that can be happen is at the DC level or the domain control level, not the individual user configuration. Did the GPO apply correctly or not? So he's saying that maybe the denied GPO will not be applied for a certain reason, or it was misconfigured. And this you have, if you have a lot of deny group policies, okay, this could be a headache in managing and troubleshooting. Okay, so let's also see another thing here. He's saying that I am a bit rusty on silos will stop the DC from even handing out Kerberos tickets or anyway, while deny is an attempt hitting the target which lead to credentials. Anyway, so as I said before, it is one way to control the access of certain users to certain resources or servers. How we can do Active Directory tiering model, not using deny login group policies, but using authentication silo policies. There is another documentation here, or another website that I have found that will teach you in details how we can do the same Active Directory tiering, not using deny login group policies, but to use the authentication silo model. Here this is the same, and he's saying this in details so you can all use it and see it, and he's talking about it in a very detailed way. So I urge you all to see this PDF, or say this document, and implement it and see the differences between making the Active Directory tier model using the deny group policy way, or using, or who is different, or who is better, using the Active Directory tiering model using deny login group policies, or by using deny login group policies, or using authentication silo policy. Let's see how we can configure this authentication silo policy. Here in our scenario, we are limiting a domain admin account, which is Tony Stark. He is a domain admin. We will limit this account only to access the two domain controllers. So this account will not be allowed to access any PC or server in the network unless it is the domain controller, or the primary domain controller, or additional domain controller. So let's see how we can do this. We will open our virtual environment. So this is the VM Workstation Pro. So we need to apply this authentication silo to activate two group policies, okay, in two different so we need to activate two group policy items in two different group policies. In the default domain policy, we need to activate a certain group policy, and in the default domain controllers, we need to activate another group policy item. Okay, so first here, what I'm doing here, I'm taking a snapshot from my domain controllers before applying the authentication policy silo method, just to make sure that I will not ruin anything. So here I am just taking a snapshot from my two domain controllers. So here this is something we can work with. Okay, also now we have taken a snapshot, like a backup from my primary domain controller. Now we will take another snapshot from my secondary domain controller. Then we will open our PAW or Privileged Access Workstation and configure the authentication silo method. Okay, and we can monitor the authentication silo process through Windows logs, so we can see the effect of the authentication silo and what happened through monitoring our Windows logs. We will see how we can do this. So let's first see how we can apply the authentication silo and see the steps. So here first we will log into the PAW using my domain admin account. And by the way, this is care of here is a domain admin account, and we are only restricting Tony Stark, which is another domain admin account. So we are restricting one of the domain admin accounts to access certain machines in the domain. So first, this is care of, this is a domain admin account. First we will pause it, and then we will open the console, and then we need to activate a certain option in the default domain policy. This should be applied to all of the servers and workstations in the domain. So this is a very critical option to use the authentication silo. So we'll configure it on the default domain policy. We will go to a certain option and then we will activate it. This is, let's say this is from the client side. So we have a client side and the server side. So a client side, this is from the workstations and servers. This should be applied from the default domain policy. And from the server side, like the domain controllers, especially if you are trying to restrict access to domain controllers, we need to configure something in the default domain controllers group policy. So here we will go, I think even if it's not if you are not restricting access to the domain controller resources, we need to configure both, something from the domain controller side and something from the workstations and other server side. So here we have gone to system, and then we will open something called, I think let's wait for a moment, from the KDC, I think from the Kerberos, not the KDC. Okay, so this is not it, no, this is not the option. We are configuring another thing. So we will open the Kerberos. Okay, so this we are configured in the default domain controller, sorry, the default domain policy, Kerberos client, support for claims, compound authentication, and Kerberos armoring. So this is from the client side. Then we need to go to the domain controller and configure another group policy item in another group policy object, the default domain controllers policy. After configuring these two, now we can work with the authentication silo, or we will begin creating the authentication silo. Okay, so now we have gone, or let's go to the group policy objects and then configure the default domain controllers policy. So the authentication silo will not work unless these two options are configured in these two group policies. Okay. Okay. And if you have custom group policies configured on groups of workstations as servers, this also should be configured not only on the default domain policy but on custom group policies if you have different layout or different group policies layout. Anyway, so you'll go to the KDC and then KDC support for claims, compound authentication, and Kerberos arming. So the support from the server side and the request of using it from the client side. So we have both configured. Now we need to configure an authentication silo. We need to make authentication silo policy to restrict the access of Tony Stark on the Tony Stark domain admin account to be restricted only to access these two domain controllers. We will do this from the Active Directory Administrative Center. Okay, so we'll do this. First we will open the Active Directory Administrative Center. So we'll pause the video. Then first we go to authentication, and then we need to configure authentication policy. The first thing is to create an authentication policy, then create authentication policy silo. So these are the steps. First we tell him new authentication policy, and we will name it restrict domain admin accounts. So we name it restrict domain admin accounts, and then we enforce policy restriction restrict domain admin accounts. This will be or restrict domain admin account or restricted domain admin account, and we use the enforce policy restrictions. Okay, we can put it in audit if you don't need to apply it and you need to monitor it anyway. So we have done this. Then we specify a ticket granting ticket lifetime to be 60 minutes to secure our domain admin account accessing to the domain controller's resources, okay, or the domain as a whole resources. So we have done this. Now we need to go to authentication policy silo and define what are the computers and users that are restricted to access, or that will be configured to access each other. So we need to make Tony Stark to access the RACC01 server and RACC02 server. Enforce policy silo, and then we need to add the two domain controllers, and then to add the user account. Okay, I need to add the user account. Okay, so we have our adding this, and then we will add a certain account. Okay, I think here we cannot add a group, you only need to add users. So we will add Tony Stark, and then after that we need to test and see if our authentication silo will work. Anyway, I think it didn't work with me here, but in the video it was working, or I didn't record it, but anyway, this is the way that, or this is the correct way to do it. Anyway, so here we say we need to choose the here we need to have this option and open or select restricted domain admins, the one that we have done in the authentication policy, the authentication policies, or we have created an authentication policies. This is the one we have created earlier in the previous step. We need to open it and then to choose it. Okay, and then tell him okay. So so now we have configured the authentication policy silo, but we need to attach it to these three things, or these three objects: the domain controller, the primary domain controller, and the second domain controller, and the user. So we'll go to global search and then we will search for T Stark. Okay, this is the user. Okay, T Stark, and then through its properties we'll tell him to use the authentication policy silo. So this is Tony Stark. From here, or from policy silo, we will choose a certain policy, authentication policy silo, to be applied to him. Assign authentication policy silo restricted domain admin. So this has been done for the user. We need to do this for the two domain controllers. So we search for the domain controller object, computer object, RACC01, and then here it is, this is the domain, and then we'll tell him to have a silo attached to it, assign authentication silo. Okay, and then choose restrict domain admin. Okay, so now we have done this for the primary domain controller. We do this for the secondary domain controller. All of the process for the authentication silo will be recorded in the Windows event log in a certain location. I will show you all how we can see it and see or monitor the operation of the authentication silo. If there is any errors or something, we can check it from the Windows event log. Okay, so now we have attached the authentication policy silo to every computer and account we need. If you go again to the policy silo, okay, and open it, we will see something like a green check. So that means that the authentication silo was successfully attached and assigned to the different domain controllers and our domain admin account. So this is good. We need now to see where the event logs will be located. If we go further, So let's see where are how we can monitor this authentication silo process from the event log. We need to see where the event log resides. Okay, so this is the domain admins. Here we need to do something. We need to have a condition. So we have successfully attached the authentication policy silo. We need here to add a condition to tell him if Tony Stark try to access these two, then you should block him. So we need to find a condition in the domain admin or the user sign on. We need to make a condition or to list a condition. Let's see what is this condition. Tell him edit, specify, add a condition. What is this condition? When a certain user that a certain authentication silo applies to him, so we are telling you that a user, when he uses authentication silo, this should be applied to Tony Stark. So here we are identifying a condition. Okay, when a user sign in and this user is Tony Stark and he is using a certain authentication silo, he knows, or we have already know, or using this authentication silo, then apply to him. So here we are identifying a condition that this authentication silo should only be applied to Tony Stark. Okay, so this is something very important. If you leave everything without doing this, then I think it will be applied to all users. We need to identify a condition to say that this authentication silo should be applied to Tony Stark, and this is the user name, not the user itself, not the first name of the user. This is the username. Okay, so we have done this, and then we need to test it. You can test it on your any other workstation to see if it will work or not. Okay, so user authentication silo equal Tony Stark. Okay, so this is a way to limit the access of a certain user to a certain high value hosts. So I think what I'm doing here first, I think maybe here I'm saying that the group policies, sorry, let's wait for a moment and see what I'm doing here. I don't know, so let's wait. I think going to service, yes, here I will show you all how we can monitor the process of authentication silo. This is the event log of the domain controller, so you can monitor the authentication silos process from any domain controller from a certain place, applications and services logs. Okay, and then we need to go to something called Microsoft Windows. Okay, and then we need to see a certain location or a certain log. Let's see here, authentication, and then authentication policy variables domain controller. Here we can monitor the process of the policy silo. Here, if there is any problem with the policy silo, it will appear in this part in the Windows event log. Let me see if there is other things here. So here I think I will shut down, we'll try to access. Anyway, what I'm doing here first, let me show you all also. Here I'm trying, let's wait for a moment. First of all, we need to refresh the group policies on the POW, okay, and the other domain controllers, so that the authentication silo will be applied, because the authentication silo is applied using a group policy. So we need to update all of the group policies in all of the domain controllers and my POW. Okay, so we will issue the CMD or open run CMD, and then we will issue the command gp update /force on this one and on the other ones. Okay, so this is it. We need to go to the primary domain controller and issue the same command and press enter, and we will go to the secondary domain controller and issue the same. We will go and enter, and then we will make also the same command. We can go further. Okay, let's go further here. The same applies. We have updated all of the group policies, and then we try to access Tony Stark on a machine other than the 3. Okay, it will not be accessed it. So let's wait for a moment. We can configure. or let's go further. Let me see if we have anything else. Anyway, so this concludes for our video. Hope this video was informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.